Amin Tarzi is the Director of Middle East Studies at the Marine Corps University in Quantico, Virginia. He received his PhD in that field from NYU. Prior to Quantico, he has worked with the Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty Regional Analysis Team on Afghanistan and Pakistan. And prior to that, he was a senior research associate at the Monterey Institute of International Studies, where he primarily researched Iran and its weapons development programs. He is the author of the Iranian puzzle piece, Understanding Iran in the Global Context. Consequently, we couldn't ask for a better person to read the riddle that is Iran. Please welcome Dr. Tarzi.
Good morning. Before I start, I'll make one caveat. Today is Saturday, and I'm here as Amin Tarzi and not as a member of the United States Defense Department. Whatever I say here is my own views and nothing to do with my job. Secondly, I want to thank Alan Talley, who's not here, and Peter Nettle for all they have done, the invitation. I'm a second comer, so I guess I'm kind of part of the team now, so I'm very honored by that. Thank you very much. And last year, in the other end of this Commonwealth, I said I came here, and I'm very happy because some of my biggest heroes and people who have actually put me here are my teachers. And I went on to a longish talk about it and actually named some of my teachers. And I said, they are my aspirations, which is the truth. Well, this year, when I looked at the schedule, Alan had put Professor Farhad Kazemi right there. He is one of my teachers. So I usually don't get nervous when I speak. I just came from a conference speaking to Marines yesterday. Yesterday we talked Iran. So, but I am actually very, very nervous because I have him right behind me, which puts me in a tough spot. So thank you very much, Alan, for that sequence. So that whatever I say which is wrong will be corrected afterwards, as was at NYU a while ago. I have slides. I'm not showing them to you. I do have a tie. When he said casual, I took that opportunity to take out of where we in the Defense Department, we PowerPoint everybody to death. That's just kind of part of the idea. And I have those slides, and I'll leave it to you if you want to post it. I thought I'll just talk to you, because when I looked at the lineup, you have a very, very amazing lineup of people coming and talking on very specific aspects. And I honestly mean, I think this is a great lineup, and it's going to be a learning process, and I'm staying here. If you have any questions on specifics, we can discuss that. I thought the title of my talk, What Every American Needs to Know About Iran, let me just talk about it, about some points, and put a more a context in which we can put the puzzles that coming in later on about specifics, the economy, the weapons issues, the relationship as a whole historic. And I think what you just heard about the comics, I wasn't an American, I wasn't even there. I came to this country in 1980 as a refugee from Afghanistan. It is right, the half-truth and what to believe. When I came to America, what did Iran mean to Americans? I went to a school in Flushing, New York, and first time in my life, I didn't speak English when I came to this country. So I was learning English in the back of a Catholic church as an ESL class, and there was a guy who was kind of my friend. We were the only ones who were not from there. He had come in from, I think he was from the Dominican Republic. And his shirt said, Iran sucks. And that's my first thing. And I didn't even know what this means. So I came to a friend, I said, what does that mean? And they were trying to explain to me the sucks part, not the Iran part. And I said, okay, I got it. So in the 80s, that's what Iran meant to Americans. We had a love affair come to an end, a relationship, I won't even call it a love affair. We weren't married with Iran, but we were sleeping very closely with each other since World War II, and especially since the 60s. And that came to an abrupt end with a revolution in Iran in 1979, and subsequently the taking of our hostages. for 444 days. If you were aware of politics or watched anything, if Ted Koppel's head every night, the whole Nightline became Nightline because it was a sequential going of what was going on the hostage crisis. So in a generation of Americans, when I came to America, we looked at Iran as a country that had invaded our embassy, which is sacred under diplomatic law, and kept our hostages, blindfolding them, humiliating them, and we tried to take them, the hostages, back. Operation Eagle Claw. Those of you who are not in the military, Eagle Claw was the operation, and we would try to go and get the hostages back. It kind of failed because we lost one of the planes in the deserts of Iran. So there were failures in that sense. And then Iran playing games with our politics, keeping the hostages until Ronald Reagan was swearing as our president in 1981. So that is the context that we have today. But our relationship, as I said, this flirtation and sleeping together is not as old as Iran is. Iran is an ancient country. It was a seat of empires. You will hear that. But Iran also had a demise. In the 19th century, Iran is nothing more than a pawn in a game, as Lord Curzon called the pieces upon which the world domination is being played. And he named Iran, Turkestan, Afghanistan, and Transcaspian, sorry. So Iran was a weaker state and diminishing in size. I would even say that since 1747, Iran has not expanded territorially at all. It actually has been contracting. But America is not part of this. We started our relationship with Iran in 1856, diplomatic relationship, but it is very much out of the US context. We come to Iran basically after World War II. And we come in as good guys. If you remember, Iran was divided. The northern part of Iran was taken under Soviet sphere of influence, and the southern edge under the British. And the United States was instrumental in bringing Iran, as we see it today, back into this feet. And also, as World War II goes on, and as Britain is leaving the Gulf area, the Persian Gulf, as you see there, Iran becomes more and more assertive there. Yet at the same time, the United States is finding Iran as a good instrument in the 70s of what was called in the Nixon Doctrine. Those of you who have looked at the Nixon Doctrine, it basically said after our not so good of a result in Vietnam, the United States looked more at not being in areas, but the Nixon Doctrine basically stipulated that it is good to have countries in region that are in alliance with us, that they become powerful within a region. So they do our job within a region. I'm sure Richard Nixon wouldn't have liked the way I put it, but that's basically the gist of it. And Iran fitted this perfectly well. So Iran becomes our regional partner in that Persian Gulf area. Richard Nixon at one point actually states that we can give Iran any weapon systems short of nuclear weapons. Any weapon systems short of nuclear weapons. And we do actually do that. The Iranians get the F-14. F-14 now is an ancient plane, but in those days it is actually the most advanced aircraft the United States has. Iran gets it before Britain even has a chance to, our very closest ally. Iran was about to get AWACS. They would have been delivered had the Shah not been toppled. So they're a very close alliance, yet we also have a relationship which we want to be, of course, the big power. Where in Iran, the Shah himself, his hubris and his ideas is trying to take Iran back into the times of ancient glory. He has something called the White Revolution, and he wants to, as he put it, revive the great civilization, Tamaddun-e Buzurg. So here we have a ambitious regional person, and Iran does become a regional power. Iran's regional ambition and powers are not related to the Islamic Republic. They are actually related in the 60s and specifically 70s with the vacuum of Britain leaving the Gulf, United States finding Iran a good instrument. So the relationship gets there. What else we need to know about it? First is that we were together. So the Iranians look back and they see that period as a period where we were together, but they are very resentful. Why? The resentments, and you will hear more about it. I would say the beginning of anti-Americanism resentment is 1953. 1951, a man by the name of Mossadegh wins the prime ministership in Iran. The Shah leaves. I'll make it short because you'll hear it. By 53, in another operation, I'm a military man, I'm a former Marine, we like operations, it's called Operation Ajax. We actually bring in our help in the MI6 of Britain. We bring the Shah back from Rome. I guess he was shaving and he's told, Your Majesty, go back and take your throne. That's the story, whether that's true or not. It shows how much we were in cahoots with Shah, who's ousted and is shaving in Rome, and we bring him back. So this is the beginning of anti-Americanism. At this point, it is mostly concentrated on the left in Iran, but eventually the Islamists get that too. Fast forward, we have a lot of bad blood, as I said, with the hostages. We actually fight with the Iranians, something that we don't look at, something called the tanker war. During the Iran-Iraq war, we actually fight with the Iranians. We actually have another operation called Praying Mantis. We do invade part of Iran. There are 2 American casualties, but the plane went down, but the Iranians take a lot of casualties. These are all the stories that underlie. Do we have to all know that? I don't think you have to know the details unless that is your subject of study. What we need to know is that Iran and the United States have had a very hard and difficult relationship. Short time, especially the history of Iran, it's a very short time. We are newcomers, yet it was very intense. And as intense as it was, this divorce is also very intense. But I don't think it's a divorce that we hate each other. I would even say that we are obsessed with each other on both ends of the spectrum. In Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, in its DNA has anti-Americanism. It cannot be taken out right now. If it is, the Islamic Republic as a whole will collapse, the ideology of it. Anti-Americanism, by extension also anti-Israeli sentiments, is part of its DNA, specifically the DNA of the people at top, which is not the president of Iran. I'm not talking about just Mr. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the supreme leader of Iran, specifically the guy who's there right now, Ali Khamenei. To be an anti-American is part of its raison d'etre, part of its being. Yet, I will even posit something else to you, and you can tell that to your students. If there's an election taken, like we had in Egypt, like we had in Tunisia, or tomorrow if there's an election in Saudi Arabia, the result will always be people who are not pro-America who would come to power. I will bet you that, and I'm not a betting man, that if there was an election like that taken in Iran today, open elections, the people who will come on top will be more pro-America. Not subservient, but more pro-America. And this is an exception. There's no other country in that part of the world that you can say that about. So, in one word, what you'll tell Iran it is, it's a country of paradox and contradiction. This is where I think when you started, actually you put me right on right. It is what you see is not what it looks like. Give you examples. All of our presidents, by the way, from President Reagan until this current president, has tried to have a relationship with Iran, at earnest. Some you don't hear about, but at earnest. Every single one of them, including President Bush. That's part of the obsession. We think Iran is much more important than it really is. We think Iran, some of us here think that Iran can destroy the world. Oh, what will happen if the Hormuz Straits are closed? This feeds back into the Iranian hubris that, you know what, we are the great power. Ahmadinejad recently stated something that is just weird. He said in the greater Middle East, and he used a word, which is actually a word we have written, there are 3 powers: the United States of America, Israel, and Iran. I said here's a contradiction from their end. On one hand, he says Israel should be destroyed. On the other hand, he accepts it as one of the 3 great powers. And if I'm a Turk, I look around and I say, what about me? If I'm a Saudi or an Egyptian, they're old too, they have been there for a while, even before Iran was. This idea is very interesting. When you read what the Iranians say and we read what we say, we both exaggerate each other's importance. In a way, we have this idea of we are very exclusive, we are different. So in a way, we are looking at each other in the eye, but we see some part of ourselves. That's what we need to know. This is maybe why while there's a hate relationship, we also have a love-hate relationship. Now, what we need to know right now about it, if you are a person that you will be teaching who's coming up, he or she may unfortunately see a war. That's a possibility as well. It's unfortunate, but yet it is. It is a possibility that we may have a war with Iran. I'm not saying that is going to happen, but it could happen. And it could happen in spite of us, because there's a new phenomenon in Iran. And here's one thing I want to tell you. And the Iranian regime, and the Iranian regime again, if our president wants to talk, we usually go to the president of Iran. That's another contradiction in Iran. The president of Iran does not matter. Ahmadinejad tried to matter, but right now he's a lame duck, and he's going to be out anyway, June next year. Whoever else comes in there, he's going to be selected very much from somewhere that the regime, i.e. the Wali Faqih, the supreme leader of Iran, Khamenei, and it is his supporters, mainly the backers of him right now, are the Islamic Revolution Guard Corps, the IRGC. Those are the two main powers right now. They are the ones who are putting policy and relationship, specifically relationship with America. So the president doesn't matter. If we want to talk to anybody, we talk to the supreme leader or his people. So again, this is something that we in America, we like things to be institutionalized. Well, I'm a president, I want to talk to a president. It's not going to happen like that. This is another contradiction in terms in Iran. But anyway, we are obsessed to talk to them. The Iranian regime, at every level, believes fully, and this is I have been working on that country for a while, that the United States, no matter who is in the White House, the policy is not just to denuclearize Iran, it is to change their regime. And there is the biggest contradiction. Anti-Americanism is a DNA of Iran, and they do not believe that the United States, when our president, our Secretary of State, says that we want Iran to, let's say, submit to a harsher inspections, that's what we want, that we want their regime changed. How to break away from that, I think, is the key if we want to bring a peaceful resolution to this dilemma we have had with Iran. And I use the word dilemma here in the Greek sense of it. Two choices, none of which are very good. Right now, we do not have a good choice because both sides are demanding something that the other side sees as existential. Iran thinks that we are there to basically cut the head of the regime. So why would they come and talk with us? They will talk with us because it is part of the deal. But they're not going to give up those weapons. And with the nuclear weapons, there's another sad story. I think this is because of the failures of Western, our non-proliferation policies. Nuclear weapons have been given a very, very important position in the world. The Iranians believe fully that the only way the United States will respect their way of life, i.e. the Islamic regime, is if they become a nuclear power or be an aspiring nuclear power. And what they point to is our relationship with Pakistan, with DPRK, North Korea, and recently, of course, with Libya. Khamenei just recently, and we have published that if you want, please see me, I'll try to get you a paper. We did something on Libya, on an aspect of Libya that is really not talked much about, which is what did Libya do to non-proliferation of nuclear weapons? And Khamenei, there's a quote there you can read. He says to Gaddafi, after Gaddafi is dead, he kind of talks as if he's sitting with Gaddafi, and he said, you child, when the Westerners came in and dangled your security in front of you, you gave them everything. And look what happened. Once you gave up your nuclear weapons, they killed you like a dog. So the idea is that the Western world respects the possession or even the trying to seek nuclear weapons. And therefore, I personally do not believe that the Iranians will give up that. And even if the current regime, the Islamic regime, changed, I don't think they will give it up. The only way they will give it up is if there's a regime that comes in that genuinely trusts us that we are not going to interfere in their affairs. Iran will not become a stooge of America. But there's a big possibility, the good story is a possibility of Iran and us having a relationship which is almost on equal footings. But we both have to agree that we are not the greatest, that we are not the one who calls the shots. And this is something, again, going back to both countries is both internal dynamics, how it works. How am I doing on time?
You're all right.
I'm good, okay. Okay. Now, what do we need to know about Iran from now on? Because your students, they are not going to deal with just what's going on right now, but as we go. If there's a war, again, and I'll be very careful how you're going to put this. I'm not saying a war is good by any stretch of imagination in any way. As a former warrior, working with warriors every day, I think we see the price of war better than people outside of it. I think generals and those who wear the uniform are more weary about war than our civilian counterparts, because once you see it, it's not as pretty as it looks on the movies. But a war in Iran is not, and this, as I said, I'm saying it, I'm not promoting it, so I'm being very, very hesitant. It's not something that it is the end of the world. Does it have to happen? I don't think so. Are there ways to prevent it? Yes. Your students, by the time they come up, something may have given in Iran. What are those things that we need to know again? First of all, that the president does not matter. The next one will not matter at all. We have a name of 5 or 6 that may come in. Most of them will be selected. Iran, again, another dichotomy or paradox, if you would. Is Iran a democracy? Yeah, partially. Is it a theocracy? Yes, it is that too. How many other countries in the world do you have that has elections for a president and have a guy who rules there on behest of Mahdi, a Messiah, or for that matter, a descendant of Prophet Muhammad of Islam? Well, that's Iran. You have the supreme leader is not elected. He rules there because he is the guardian of the religious aspect of it. He's there in lieu of the Mahdi until he shows up. Where you have a presidential election. Are the elections genuine? Yes, they're pretty good. But it is an election selection. Why? Because the candidates are vetted before they come to the polls. Once they come there, even the elections are, yes, manipulated. Last election, 2009, was manipulated very much. So I don't think you should expect something very grand in the next election. It's going to be somebody who's going to be in line with Khamenei. Your students, again, when they come up, what they should know, if we don't have a war. In case of war, I can't tell you what's going to happen. If you want, I can do that in Q&A, scenarios that may happen. You're going to have a Iran which will be more and more hurt economically. That will happen because of sanctions, but also because of a lot of the Iran's own internal economic policies. The Iranians are acknowledging that sanctions are hurting about 40%, but the majority of blame is being given on their own, and right now they're giving it mostly on Ahmadinejad. So Ahmadinejad will be the scapegoat. They may get a better person to manage the economy a better more. But also the sanctions allow them to say that it's a Western world, America in particular, that's affecting Iran. So it's helping their rhetoric that they are under attack, therefore they have to tighten their belt. So what should we expect? I think the changes or the points that could bring about change within Iran. One is the unexpected death of Khamenei without a smooth succession. He's 73, but there are rumors he's sick. Mullahs Ayatollahs somehow live very long. I don't know what they do, but they live long. Just go to any seminary in Qom, or look at some of the Iranians have this Majlis-e Khobragan, the Guardians Council. Just go, the average age I think is 89 or something. I mean, it's just, I don't know how they live that long, but they do. Priests live long. Maybe they actually, I don't know. I'm not going to go there. So here you have these, but they say he's sick. So he's 73, he may die. If he dies tomorrow without a succession, that could rupture the regime internally. That's one thing. Two is that I just told you the IRGC is now an ascent. Khamenei right now is not subservient to IRGC, but the IRGC and Khamenei have joined forces together. This is something much new. This happened basically since 2009. You have the supreme leader is not as supreme as he was beforehand. Why? Because he needed the power of this military in order to go against the president. The IRGC, while selected by the supreme leader at the top levels, is not all in the same mind. They are now involved in many of Iran's economic activities. They are becoming rich, and they want to preserve that. So the IRGC may at one point feel that they want to change the regime from within in order to keep their own privileges. That's a situation that may actually work. Perhaps you'll get more of a dictatorship, but at least you get some party that you can talk to. Third, obviously, is if Iran does a nuclear breakout. Do they have enough fissile material? Yes, they do. I mean, partially. They can have it. Iran's biggest problem is weaponization. It's not fissile material. And this whole thing about 20%, we are obsessed with 20%. You know, once you have the 5%, 20% is 3 months apart. It's not, doesn't take extra technology. See, we talk about this. What your students know about is that a lot of these very technical issues are talked about in the media and in high schools and colleges without understanding of what they mean. Even our politicians, oh wow, it's 20%. What does it mean? What does 20% mean? Doesn't mean anything. You spin that thing more faster, you're going to get 20%. That's about it. It is other aspects of it that Iran still needs help. Even if they had an atomic device, but it was the size of this room, it won't be deliverable, so it doesn't do it very well. Saddam had one of those in the 1990s. It is the delivery system. You need to make it to at least 800 kilograms, maximum 1,000 kilograms. And then you have to have a platform to take it to where you want to take it. And I will make another thing. And this may not go well for some people who think Iran is about to wage war. I don't think Iran wants a nuclear weapon to wage war. I think Iran wants a nuclear technology, and I don't think they will even weaponize. I think they want to show us that they have it, or they have the technology to get one, but they will stop short of weaponization. Why? Because at that point, they, in my view, in my calculation, they will gain the respect that they will be treated and given a seat at the table, as we gave Gaddafi, as we are giving Pakistan and DPRK. DPRK is not a very good country, yet they're not getting slapped. They lob missiles right across our ally Japan, nothing happens to them. Is it because of their nuclear weapons? Doesn't matter. The perception out there is that it is because of their nuclear weapon. Relationship with Pakistan is now being talked a lot about. Why is the United States so passive with Pakistan? With all what we claim Pakistanis are doing. And the vision out there is because Pakistanis have nuclear weapons. Not that they will hit us with nuclear weapons, but that we are worried that if something happens and we destabilize Pakistan, these weapons could go in the hands of the bad guys, and guess you have a bearded guy with a nuclear device somewhere, which is a nightmare scenario, which it is a nightmare scenario. So Iranian calculation is that it is all about time. The other issue with us, what we know about, is that United States policy right now is on a 2-year segment, which has always been there. The foreign policy in Iran has been very consistent, but we still have elections, and Iran has become part of our national election cycle. So whatever we say in Pittsburgh or in Ohio or California is heard out there. While, as I said, our policy on basic sense has not changed much. It really hasn't. We have a consistent, pretty much a consistent foreign policy. But the rhetoric goes out there. The rhetoric sometimes makes a lot of waves. In Iran, US is Iran's main foreign policy. They keep on talking about it. So those create a lot of tension, unintended tension, but it is there. So we have to be worried about it. They care about us. They look at us. They even emulate us to the point that is amazing. If you have time, go to the Iranian website for the foreign ministry. It's fascinating. The Iranian foreign ministry spokesman has a plaque behind him. It's blue, it's oval, it says in Persian and English, the Islamic Republic of Iran Foreign Ministry. Didn't go to State Department. It looks almost the same. They pick the same color, the same oval shape. Somehow there's this obsession. The IRGC, the most hated military force in the area that I am dealing with, which we call in the military the Central Command, they wear baseball caps. They look actually from outside, they look like a baseball player. I don't know why, there's a lot of things that I look at. I say, there is this contradiction as we go. So what's going to happen for your next high school people? I hope we don't get another people like I got in Flushing High School as Iran sucks. My hope is, and this is hope doesn't create foreign policy, but the hope is that there's an understanding that we have Iran as a legitimate player there, but not as the sole legitimate player, because they are not the sole legitimate player. Somebody needs to talk to them, and talk to them privately, because if you talked about them outside, Iranian pride and hubris will get reaction. That there's other countries there. Turkey, for example, the Iranians can ignore the Arabs as, there's not a very good relationship between the Persians and Arabs. But Turkey, they cannot ignore. They are both ancient countries, and if you put an Iranian right now in Ankara, it will be very depressing for them. Turkey is doing pretty well. They're doing very well, actually. Economically, the cities are just growing like crazy. I've been there now 4 times this year, and they're doing very well. When you come there and you see this, and here's it, well, who's the leaders of Turkey? They're Islamists. Yet there seems to be a balance, and you can't say Turkey is running the United States as our poodle, as Iran would call it. They're not our poodle. So there are models that Iran could look at and say, okay, there are ways that we could be prestigious. We could take our place in the region and work with the United States as one of the partners, not as somebody who was within there. But there, a fundamental change has to happen. That anti-Americanism is not the reason for the Islamic Republic. Is that in the cards right now? Not with Khamenei. Not with Khamenei. With the IRGC, I think so. Somebody may say he's crazy, but I think the IRGC, within IRGC, because you're not dealing with one person with a very specific mindset. So, lastly, what I say, and I'll end at that, we cannot solve Iran. I don't think who would win the White House. We cannot solve it. The best we can do right now is to manage the problem. We have to look at problem management rather than solving it. There's no way to solve something where the end game of both is the destruction of the other, at least in their mind. When the end game of both is the destruction of the other, in their own mind. I repeat myself because that is very important. In my previous life, I negotiated with Iranians for 7 years, what we call track 2. We used to sit with Iranians just like this. It ended in 2009. That's all I can tell you about. We met them. We met them and we talked to them and we faced them. So a lot of what I say is not just coming in from books, I'm coming in from talking to Iranian officials. If you come to my office, I try to always put these things about negotiations and peace and trying to get a way out. I do not see a negotiated way out, but I don't also see war as the way out. I think there is a way to manage it. This is all I'm saying is from the United States perspective. There are other countries in the region that may not see the situation the same way. And they have every right not to. They have every right not to. Their history is very different than the United States. Nobody set out to put us in ovens and kill us. And when you invoke that, things happen. So we are not the only one in this place. Again, Iran and US have this idea that we can do whatever we want in there. As powerful as we are, and as ancient as Iran is, and they think that they're much more powerful. Iran, by the way, now, as I say, they say there are only 3 powers in the region. None of us, neither the United States nor Iran, can single-handedly or bilaterally fix that place. So managing is the best thing. And I don't think, and I'll leave it at that, I do not think Iranians, including Khamenei, is suicidal. They're not crazy. Ahmadinejad is not crazy. He is very calculating, and he knows what he's doing. They're not crazy. This is not some crazy guy, like Mullah Omar, who comes up with some weird idea. They are very calculating people. They are not. Look at the Iranian foreign minister today, Salehi, has a PhD from MIT. They have very, very intelligent people around them. They may not sound very logical to us because our logic and their logic do not jive, but they're not crazy. So I wish I had something to tell to your students that, this is what we need. What we need to know is a contradiction, a country that could become our friend genuinely in an election. I promise you, if there is an election without direct interference by the Iranian regime, the regime falls, there's an election somehow, without us going there by military. If we do, that's all over. That's another thing. If we go there by military, what I'm telling you that Iran will become a country which is pro-America, not subservient to America. That will go all out the window if we have a war with them. Right now, there's a genuine feeling of respect to us by the people. The government does not like us, and which is very interesting. The rest of them, every revolution, even if we help them, like in case of Egypt, the next thing they do is burn our flag, which is problematic. So it's a dichotomy, contradiction, and tell your students to think about it, please. Think about it, don't see it black and white. I think goes back, what was that?
1961.
Okay, go to 1961 comic book and see that. Half-truths and which one is true, they have to think, write good theses about that. And thank you for teaching the next generation. If you have any questions, at your service.
Thank you very much. That was great.
You do Q&A here?
Yeah. We'll take questions. We do have, since we are videotaping this for posting on our website, we do ask you to use the microphones that are being handed out by our staff. So if you raise your hands, and actually if you have a question that you want to put on a queue, turn up your tent card so it's vertical, and then we'll be able to see you and we'll get to you eventually. So would anybody like to begin? Samuel Feldberg.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. My first question is, you mentioned Turkey as possible role model for Iran. I would like to hear your comments about Turkey as a strategic rival to Iran in the region. And another short question, under which conditions would you see the possibility of an effective attack against Iran? What would be necessary to bring the decision to attack Iran, either by the US or eventually by Israel?
Okay. I'll start with your first question, which is much easier for me. But I'll try to tackle the second one. Yes, you're right. A country we didn't mention because it's not on our agenda right now, Syria. Syria may be a flashpoint with whatever I said right now to you, which will put it all in its head. Syria is where right now there are proxy wars going on, despite the fact, beyond the fact, and I'm not unaware of the fact that there are 30,000 Syrians dead, and my great-grandmother is from Aleppo, so I do have a little bit of a personal connection to Syria as well. But that's besides the point. In politics, 30,000 people is significant sometimes, some not significant other times. And I'm not trying to be cold-hearted here. But there is a proxy war going on. As you know, Syria is launching some shells into Turkey. Turkey is very close to, at least they're taking some actions. There's cross-border firings going on. Turkey is very hesitant to go in there because of, one reason is because they don't want a regional war with Iran. Syria is Iran's main ally in the Arab world. I would say the most important ally they have anywhere. Without Syria, Iran will be cut off from its long hand. Number one, Hezbollah, which is now being dragged into this war in Syria, will be cut off. And Hezbollah is Iran's biggest proxy organization out there, not Hamas. Hamas is moving away from Iran right now, but Hezbollah has the same DNA, basically, with the Iranian regime. And Syria is also where Iran shows that they can actually, part of the whole ideology of the current regime in Iran is that you do not back down against opposition, that you never apologize. And I think they're teaching that exact same thing to President Bashar al-Assad of Syria. And they are helping them openly. I mean, IRGC commander Jafari just said, not just 2 weeks ago, that yes, we have some advisors there. So there is a possibility, and rivalry, yes, Turkey and Iran came close for a while under the no problems with neighbors of Foreign Minister Davutoglu of Turkey, but that's out the window. There's a rivalry going on, not only on case of Syria, but with the Kurdish issue, Iraq. Iran obviously is supporting the current regime of Maliki, whereas Syria is kind of ironically, but they're supporting the Kurdish and the Sunni. So there's a lot of flashpoints there, and also on the pipelines and the ways that how to get the hydrocarbons out, Turkey and Iran are competing. What I said, all of that does not diminish what I said, but that means Turkey is a player. That means Turkey matters internationally, that Turkey has influence around it. So when I say a model, that don't mean that they like Turkey, that they look at Turkey and say, okay, well, they can do all of these things. Yet they have an Islamist agenda. The prime minister of Turkey, the foreign minister, the president, they all come from an Islamist party. AKP is Islamist, meaning it's a party that is a political party based on Islamic principles. So that's what I meant. So that does not divorce one from the other. Actually, it enforces what I was telling you, that Turkey is a player, a major player, regional player. Iran keeps on saying that we have a right to be a regional player. Well, Turkey is doing it, and nobody's stopping them. Actually, Turkey wants more US help, more other help to deal with it, but they are doing their own work. So, you know what I'm trying to say, that Turkey is an active country within the region, acting beyond its borders, and it's respected, yet it has an Islamist government. So Iran doesn't have to give up its Islamist credentials, be a player, be a fair player, yet be respected. So that's what I say, the model aspect of it. Your second question, I cannot talk about the state of Israel. Actually, next week we have a very senior Israeli coming to talk to our place, and if you're in Quantico, you're more than welcome. It's open to the public, and you can come and see what they will say. And I had an Israeli missile expert a few weeks ago, and that's online. If you want, I can see what they said. But let me tell you, so Israel has a genuine, in my view, genuine fear, because, as I said, the history of Israel is different. Not Israel itself, but history of the Jewish people is very different. And it is impossible, in my view, to replicate it and rationalize it if you're not part of that. I go to Israel a lot, and I try to understand, but I will never be part of it because I'm not. The same thing that if I tell you about the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan when I was 14, and you can talk about it, oh yes, but nobody knows. But even that was just one incident. We lost a few family members. Here, it was a concerted effort by a very advanced country at the time to exterminate a whole people. With that in mind, the politics differ. And secondly, with Israel, right now Israeli politics is going more and more and more to the right. You just have a new party, which is a combination not of a middle of centrist party and a more right-wing party, which is Likud, but you have Likud and Beit Israel together, and now it's called Likud Our House, or Our Home, Likud Beit. So with Israeli politics going very much to the right, Iran is now the main focus of this threat. And as I said, you cannot rationalize it. So I cannot talk whether Israel does something or not. What I can tell you is whatever Israel or anybody else, Turkey, does something in Iran, the United States will become involved. There's no way out of it, whether we like it or we don't like it. So we have to be, in our case, we have to be prepared for the eventuality of a backlash. Even if the United States tells whatever the third party is, Saudi Arabia, because Iran is right now entangled with Saudi Arabia too. They're fighting a proxy war not only in well, Bahrain is not a war, but it's a more political game. People are being killed, but it's not a war in that sense. But in Syria, the Saudis are arming the opposition. The Turks are helping, but the Saudis are the ones that are putting all the money out. So there are proxy wars going on everywhere. So somebody else may invoke Iran to some kind of a military confrontation. If it does, the United States will be involved. So we have to be prepared. This is why this whole crazy notion, well, all options on the table. Of course it's always on the table. If not, I will be out of a job. We're all there. This is any country that has a military has an option on the table. This is something else. We know, our politicians sometimes don't come and say, look, what do you mean by all options? We have a very, very large military presence there. Even if Iran was our best ally, we still have it. All the options there. Option doesn't mean that you go and shoot somebody. Option means that you have the option. So that, I mean, people forget about this notion of the semantic of it. So United States has to be ready. But what I will tell you is, should we think that if something like that happens, and again, as I want to be very clear, I don't promote it, I don't provoke it, and I don't want it. But if something like that to happen, is that the end of the world? No, it's not. I would not, as I said, former Secretary of Defense, whom I have great respect for, Mr. Gates said that if any US president wants to land troops, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the quote with me, lands troops in a Middle Eastern country should have his head checked. I think that is a true statement in my view. But what I'm saying is we have to be prepared. The only caveat is there that if that eventuality happens, it's not the end of the world. So it will be devastating, but it's not the end of the world. That's all I can say.
Thank you. We'll go to Jerry Levin, sitting here, from Deerfield High School, Deerfield, Illinois.
Thank you. It seemed to me that it's a win-win proposition for Iran whether or not there is a war. If there is a war, that strengthens the current government. It kills or puts to rest any sense of Iranian nationalism that might otherwise succeed in helping to overthrow the current government. If there is no war, well, then it'll be because presumably Iran has obtained a nuclear capability. But unless I misunderstood you, you had said that perhaps, these are my words, perhaps the RGC is a solution in that somebody else would come to power, but that might mean another dictator. It strikes me then that once again, the people of a country with whom the United States has a relationship with its dictatorial government will be sacrificed. And apart from whether or not it's in the interest of the United States to be more concerned about the people of the country versus the capabilities of its government, wouldn't we then still be inviting problems down the road, just as we've seen in, well, throughout the Middle East and other countries in the world as well?
Well, let me ask, your question is very, it has a lot of dimensions. I'll go from the back, try to answer it, because I think this is going to bring back to us, what does it mean to us? You said government to people. Well, we supported the people in Egypt, not the government. Mubarak was an ally, as best an ally as you would want. And on principle, we went with the people, right? I'm not saying we shouldn't have, but sometimes democracy is a messy thing. And the notion is we have, and this is something, again, maybe hopefully we teach it in high schools. I was in a public high school and I had some amazing teachers. What is democracy? There's a notion in the American mindset that democracy means Jeffersonian democracy. Where in our own country, some of people think Jefferson was too whatever. He's by the way, my most favorite American president. When I moved to Virginia, I told one person, I said, I wasn't happy coming to Virginia from Monterey, California, but so I moved to the Commonwealth. I said, at least now I'm in the state that Jefferson is buried in and he was born in, and he pretty much called it home always. But Jeffersonian democracy, with the way the United States came about, and here there are much more experts about U.S. Beginning of the United States, but I'm just a student of it. But that was a time in history that was very unique to bring those people together in this very state here, this Commonwealth. And we think that if you have democracy, you're going to get something like that. Well, you won't. And I'm not again saying that we should not support the people. All I'm saying is when we support the people, we have to be aware that sometimes when you support the people, the next thing they do is burn your own flag and fly Al-Qaeda flag on your embassy, and you get, oh, wow, what happened? Most of the countries in the Middle East, if you have genuine elections, you're going to get anti-American feelings on the surface. The populations do not like us. In Iran, yes, that's the case. What I said about IRGC is, if the IRGC decides, and this is a big if, to take power and have after Khamenei, because with Khamenei, the system he is at the pinnacle of the power structure in Iran, and IRGC goes under him. I think the president has become rendered powerless. This is why talking to the president or his people is just futile. It doesn't mean anything. It's all for politics. It's good for the media. The IRGC steps in. What you may do is because right now the big problem we have is the war issue. If somebody, the IRGC, decides that we're going to curtail the nuclearization because we feel comfortable enough, you have a time that the Iranians come out. I used to go to Iran, now I can't go as a US government official. I believe that the Iranian people will eventually come back up, but not right now. They are sick and tired of revolution. Where the Arabs want revolution because they have seen such stagnation, the Iranians have been in a revolution since '79. This is a very different country. That's another thing what we need to know about them. They are not a revolutionary people. They have heard the word revolution and halab in Iran is a bad word, whereas in Arab world, it's a good word. The Egyptians called their revolution the 25th January Revolution, very proudly. Thawra in Arabic, not al-halab, but Iranians, you say the word inqilab or revolution, it is a bad word. It's a 4-letter word. You know what I'm saying? They are sick and tired of revolution. Why do you think that the 2009 Iranians, before all the Arab revolt, the Iranians put more people on the street than the entire Egyptian revolution put together? Why did they back down? Because I don't think the Iranian people are right now willing to shed blood on the streets for a change. They want. Did I say something? I'm good. Maybe that was no. So you know what I'm trying to say? This is more. If you're around here, we go and have a beer, and I'll tell you more about that. Because I'm working right now. Iran is my #1 topic. Egypt is #2. And when I look at the differences, you're right. If we should, there's a lot of critics in America saying why we did not support the 2009 movement fully. What does it mean to support them? I'm not saying we shouldn't have, but the question here is, and first of all, the leaders of that movement, especially Mr. Mousavi, would have not given up the nuclear weapons. He's more revolutionary than Ahmadinejad ever has been. So that's another thing. It's what you want to. I say that if we have a popular uprising in Iran or a popular genuine revolution, I think it will be very pro-American. Or it will be looking at America as a good power and not as a bad power. But to intervene in Iran, even on behalf of the people, will backfire. Anything we do there, we're damned. The best view, as I say, is to manage it with less of us they see, let them internally work out their things. The hope here is, and this is the catch thing, which the first question was, there is this very, very real threat of a war there. And if that happens, in my view, the war will actually, going back to your first question, if the war is limited, yes, you're absolutely right. In my view, and what we look at, will strengthen the regime. But what if the war decapitates the regime? There is a decapitation possibility. I'm not saying occupation of Iran, but what if the war decapitates the regime in a way that, again, the IRGC comes up and says, okay, we're going to sue for peace, but in the meantime, guess who's the symbolic guy out? The president doesn't matter. We know it. So what if Khamenei just suddenly dies? He dies very young. So there is a possibility that the pressure, because as I told you, Iran is not suicidal. Whenever we pushed them back, they have pulled back. Yes, they have gotten us other ways. Remember there was the shooting down by accident, Iranians don't think it was by accident, of Flight 655 of Iran Air, 1988, was it? The Iranians claim that we shot them on purpose. Whichever way you say it, we did not, but that's what they think. They did not react to it. Praying mantis, they did not react to it. They reacted differently later on. Khobar, other bombings, they have killed a lot of our people. Marines too. Beirut bombing, 1983. 264 Marines were killed in that time. I actually was in uniform, so I remember it unfortunately very vividly. I wasn't there. I'm here standing in front of you. But so the thing is that when you put at that aspect of it, I think a war in Iran depends on what a war does. And this is another thing, when you look at scenarios, and I'm not going to be, all I can tell you is, it's not just, especially at a war that we are not planning. You know what I'm saying? If somebody else does something and we get involved in it, anything could happen. And if anything could happen, it could strengthen the regime on one hand, but it could decapitate it without us knowing who is coming out of it, which goes back to Iraq, you know? In Iraq, you go in there without a long plan of how to manage the victory. The victory comes very fast, but the management of post-victory was not, you know, was kind of messy. Am I answering you?
You started to say if the IRGC takes power. So it seems to me if the IRGC takes power and puts in place a dictatorial government, whatever that may mean, it seems to me that that in itself, plus the existence of the internet, social media, that you're not going to be engendering support on behalf of, from the Iranian people for the United States. You're not improving the situation because you've replaced one bastard with another, except that this bastard is our bastard. So isn't this just going to blow back in our face down the road?
If we were to be directly involved in it, but what I'm saying is if that comes as a result of an action, if the war happens already, I'd say we lost the population. I said that if a war comes in, no matter who does the war, Iranians are very nationalistic. That country has been there for a while. And one of these negotiations, I remember there was an Israeli colleague, the Iranian looked at him and said, "Do you read your Bible?" And he kind of first was thinking, what is he talking about? He said, "Yes, I do read my Bible once in a while." He said, "See who the good guys were." So they go back to that point. But what I'm saying is if there is a war, no matter who starts it, that goodwill that I'm saying will go out the window. So that's already gone. The second thing is the population. As I said, the best scenario is if Iran tomorrow has a good internal change. That's the best thing, best scenario. I think we're going to get the best result. That is a huge if, because this regime is here to stay for now. They're not going anywhere. And because they're not going anywhere, so I'm looking at, as I say, the dilemma here. My fear is that as long as this regime continues and pursues its nuclear potential, the potential for a conflict rises. And that's going to be bad for everybody. So maybe the best scenario is if there's an internal change, even bringing out a IRGC in power, which hopefully diminishes this anti-Americanism as part of its DNA. So this is a scenario where America has not opposition to America is not part of the existence of the Islamic Republic. If that changes, I think you have room for negotiation. Right now, I personally do not think there's room for negotiation. I hope I have answered you.
In the corner, Susan Turnator from Carmel High School in New York State.
Thank you. You talked about Iran as being a country of contradictions and having a logical perspective, but one that's very different from ours, and that we shouldn't look at Ahmadinejad and the leaders as crazy but calculating. So he's held several conferences on the legitimacy of the Holocaust. My students look at that and say he's crazy. So how can I present it as something that's more calculating and something that they can understand?
Okay, that's very good. First of all, he's not the first one who said it. Khamenei, there's the two differences. Ahmadinejad denies the Holocaust. Khamenei thinks it was a conspiracy between the Jews and the Germans to take the state of Israel, or Palestine from Israelis. I think that's even worse. So nobody talks about Khamenei where he's the most important person. Why? Because he doesn't say those things in public. But he says it, and I didn't, you know, I have never met Khamenei, but I have read it in his own. He actually has a website. You can go to it. It's in 17 languages, including English. Go read his sermons. Yeah, he believes that the Holocaust was actually a conspiracy between Jews and Europeans in order to take over Palestine. So in my view, the denial is actually less provocative than that, that actually here the Jews sat with Germans and allowed 6 million of them to be killed so they can get Palestine. So the ideology is here, okay, the anti-Israeli Holocaust business is part of, as I said, when you look at Khamenei, somebody said it, and I don't know who, so I don't want to name the person. He said if Khamenei wasn't a Muslim, he would have been definitely a Marxist. He comes in from a very 1960s Marxian ideology, and they look at this Palestinian liberation as part of, again, part of their very core. And they see the whole issue of justice, and they see injustice in the Iran and the Arab world by the West, and they see Israel as the continuation, the entire state of Israel, not Jews. It's not about Jews. It's the state of Israel, the concept of state of Israel as a continuation and presence, continuing presence of this injustice. So, when Ahmadinejad denies Holocaust and he comes to New York and dines with some of the groups of Brooklyn Jews who also, for other reasons, want the destruction of state of Israel, that is provocation. You have to understand, Ahmadinejad is a showman. He loved, one of his best places he loved was to come in the UN and talk. At one place he said that when he was talking at the UN General Assembly, he said, I could see that the people in front of me were so mesmerized that their eyes were looking at me, and I could see that I had a glow around me. This guy, do you think, okay, you think about, okay, is he really wacko? Or is he saying that for a specific reason? He has this, he provokes. He provokes because that allows him to be important. He also provokes because he wanted to step further away from Khamenei and actually insert himself as a real president, i.e. the executive in Iran. And he was slapped. His hand was slapped in 2011 very harshly, and therefore he's now backing off. He hasn't said it since 2011. Why? Because he was told to. A crazy man would have not stopped. So it was a calculation that he wanted you to say, look, I am not just even saying, I am a denial of this thing because you are supreme leader. I am a genuine person believing in these things. To get his stripes and credentials within this group of people who not only dwell on this, that makes up their ideology. And the last thing is that they actually believe it. Does that make them crazy? In our mind, yes. Watch who you call crazy. Because if somebody believes something because of a different perspective, if you call them crazy and you go into a debate or battle, you're going to lose because you don't know what's coming at you. So I will always say, use the term from Seneca, to hear the other side. Hear them, don't accept them. You may actually have to go and literally throw up. But hear where they come from, because that makes you more powerful, and especially in a negotiation situation, that makes you more, you have more tools in your box. You have more tools to deal with them because you can understand where they're coming from. He is not crazy. I have no doubt about that. Because when, as I said, a crazy person would have kept on saying that. Listen to his messages and how it shifts in time when needs be. Look at him since 2011, when Khamenei basically told him that, you know what, We gave you a chance, you jumped over your limits, and now you're going to sit down here and be a good boy. So now he's meeting, his biggest meetings are right now are with the president of, where is it? He has three very good friends. Mugabe, yes, Mugabe, Morales, and Chavez. There's a picture of Ahmadinejad and Chavez dancing salsa or something. It was just amazing. Go to his website. I'm not kidding you. The two of them are dancing, celebrating his victory and his defeat of cancer, which, by the way, they believe that the West has been giving, United States have been giving cancer to all Latin American leaders. It's you know, these part of these ideas, you can call it crazy, and you give them, actually, you dismiss something that is more important and bigger. So you tell your students that sometimes there are some things that are very, and this is my just very humble advice, that there are some things that are not in line with what we think, that they may come totally from the left field, but they have a historical and a political purpose. And learning them doesn't make us weak. I don't think we should shy away from learning this. We have an issue, especially on the Holocaust, partially because of our own guilt. Because of our own guilt. The whole world's guilt, because the world just sat down there for a long time. Everybody knew what was going on, maybe not in the gory details, but people knew about it. So maybe because of that, we don't talk about it. I think not talking about it is a crime. Talking about it and looking at these fringe views makes it more, it has to be always remembered, because unless you remember it, we are bound to repeat something like that. Maybe, hopefully not in that scale, but something horrible again. So as an educator, we have to talk about it. Even those who come out from total, as I say, disgusting viewpoints, to see why politics brings these things, and why in the history of mankind, or humankind, I should say, atrocities keep on happening, because we allow it to go away. You know, we just adopted a child from Russia, and where our child is from is in Siberia. There are statues of Stalin being put up there in the city of Ulan-Ude. And I look around and I say, dudes, really? I mean, yeah, I have pictures. You want it right there on my phone. Joseph Stalin coming back. The guy killed more people than Hitler did. Yes, he's a hero because we don't talk about it. But he did. Thank you.
Okay, we have a question from David Noblet, Hunter High School in North Carolina.
Hi, Dr.
Hello.
Hi, Dr. Tarzi. How are you? I was
Hi.
in uniform in '83 too, so I understand the perspective it gave you. And my question is, in the '90s, as the United States is not really stopping Taliban control of Afghanistan, what is the Iranian government's role in the Taliban, or even into Al-Qaeda? I mean, we've seen the IEDs, supposedly some come from Iran. Is there an official capacity between Iran and the Taliban, or how does that work?
Thank you. Thank you for your service. And I was a resident of the great Tar Heel State when I was in beautiful Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, for a long time in my life. Afghanistan and Iran is another very good case where you see this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde aspect of Iran very well. Actually, one of the best case studies is to look at Afghanistan and how Iran plays the good guy and the bad guy simultaneously, which goes back to what I said initially, the contradiction. If you allow me, when the Taliban come in, the Taliban are staunchly Sunni, anti-Shia. You should say that they are absolutely anti-Iran. They actually killed 8 diplomats in Mazar-e-Sharif, northern Afghanistan, and 1 journalist. And Iran didn't do anything. It goes back to my whole thing as when Iran is pushed, sometimes they pull back. They amassed troops at the Afghan border, but they didn't do anything. Some people even say that that was the first time an Iranian embassy was attacked, or a consulate for that matter, and it was payback. We didn't do anything, by the way. We had nothing to do with it. 2001, the Taliban are removed. Some people say that that was a gift from the United States to Iran, and in the way it was. The Iranians tried to help. Actually, we would have not had the relationship, the organization of Afghan system with Karzai, Mr. Karzai as the head of the transitional system in Bonn, without Iranian help. The Iranians were instrumental to the very, very minor and major details on how we got the agreement. If you want, again, it's a long story. I'm still here tonight. We can talk about it in detail. I actually happen to have been there, so I can tell you quite a bit of details of what happened and how the Iranians helped. They even wanted to work with us. They sent us a letter that they wanted to train Afghan forces with us, believe it or not. And we did work in Western Afghanistan and Herat together, while not officially, but we worked in both our side and their side knew that it was an American project with Iranian project, working together without official contact. And we had the best, closest official US-Iranian contact ever since '79 on the Afghan case. The closest we came, because we had a potential joint objective. This said, I always say that if you look at Afghanistan as a roulette table, Iran has a chip on every single number. No matter where that little ball falls, they can't lose. They have more assets in Afghanistan than they have in Iraq. And Iran and Afghanistan is not just the issue of strategic, which it is, not just the issue of making sure that the United States is not comfortable for two reasons. One, if Afghanistan becomes a stable state, it shows that American help actually makes people more stable, when Iran always wants to show that American involvement leads to chaos, i.e. Iraq, and now Afghanistan. Secondly, of course, if we have bases there that they see as a threat. But also because they want to expand their reach into Central Asia. But the other thing is Afghanistan and with Tajikistan are the only countries that speak Persian as their main language. And when you look at Iranian ideology and Iranian history, without Afghanistan under Iranian cultural, not domination, but cultural umbrella, Iran loses its very ancient history. When you read the Shahnameh of Ferdowsi, which is kind of Iran's equivalent of the Iliad or the Odyssey or of ancient Greece and ancient Rome, the Shahnamehs, most of the heroes are in what is today Afghanistan. The locations are what is today Afghanistan. So they have to have that idea. Because of that, it is multidimensional. Even if the United States was not even in the picture, let's say we decided, look, we will leave Afghanistan, we will not even have a single force there. Just imagine for a minute. Iran will have a say there. The third issue is, of course, they want to confront Pakistan/Saudi Arabia and influence in Afghanistan. With all these reasons, they're back. But their allies are not just the Shia. On contrary, during the Afghan civil war, their main ally were the Sunnis, Ahmad Shah Massoud, Tajik Sunni, against the Shia, They actually allowed Massoud to shoot Scud missiles at the Shias. And the Shias have never forgiven them. We had in Quantico just 2 years ago, the top Shia cleric and the top number 2 member of Afghan parliament, Haji Muhaqiq. We brought him to Quantico. And he actually said it in public. He said, look, the Iranians were the ones who were killing us. We are aware of that. I'll tell you the story later on that I took him to the Pentagon. That was a story. Because we took him to the memorial, and he's wearing something exactly, a turban and everything. Well, we'll talk about that later. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say right now is that Iran has different ideas. And look at another thing, Shia Sunni. When the Taliban come to power, Hikmatyar, one of the staunchest anti-Shia Sunni leaders of Afghanistan, today he's fighting with us in northeastern Afghanistan. Where does he go? Pakistan no longer needs him because they have the Taliban. Mr. Hikmatyar becomes a guest of Iran. He has a beautiful 6-bedroom apartment in Tajrish, northern Tehran. And he's there until September the 21st, 2001, where he's no longer useful. He's sent back. So they have assets. They have assets within Kazakh administration, within Afghan parliament, within Afghan police, within Afghan, every level they have people. And they want to have this relationship. They do not want Afghanistan to be a very destabilized person, but they do not want to stabilize Afghanistan with America's aid. So they want us out. That's their first objective. But they rather have us, United States there, than Pakistan and Saudi Arabia pushing a Sunni agenda. Your question about the weapons to the Taliban, yes, they did send it. The first major shipment, which is now public knowledge, I can tell you, was in September 2007. They sent a large shipment of pretty much the same weapons that were used in Iraq. I wrote a paper, an Israeli paper. If you want, I'll send you the link to it. My whole idea was that the Iranians sent that wanting to be caught. And I give some details that what I was allowed to give is the weapons were sent in not through our lines, but through the lines of the Spaniards and the Italians who control Herat under this ISAF, International Security Assistance Force, which is in Afghanistan, the NATO force. They send it through their line. And again, this is public knowledge, so I'm not. And my view was the reason they did that, and the reason the way the British and everybody else saw that was they wanted to be caught in order to tell the weaker links, if you would, in NATO, that we can injure you. If you do something, and this is right at the height of the negotiations and the Europeans kind of coming on our side, that they have a soft target in Afghanistan to hurt the Europeans should an action be taken against Iran inside Afghanistan. Iran always wants to have proxies to hurt or injure because their military, their conventional military, is absolutely in demise. They don't have a conventional military. That's another thing. We should not worry about Iranian conventional military. What we should worry about is their asymmetric, their small boats that could buzz or swarm us. They do not have, their navy really is in bad shape, their real navy. Yeah, they have a couple of kilo-class submarines. I'm glad I'm no longer in uniform in one of those submarines because they're old Russian submarines that really don't work. Their air force is a joke. So what Iran has is these proxies and the IRGC. So Afghanistan is a perfect place for them to hurt if they wanted, the United States or the Europeans, and therefore they help the Taliban. They don't have a love affair, but this comes back to they're not crazy. It seems very, very contradictory, as I said, yet they're masterful in playing people even that they should hate, i.e. the Taliban, but they use them, and they don't want the Taliban to win, but in that case they use them in order to send a message that we can even go and use a staunch Sunni anti-Shia group in order to hurt you because the priorities of Iran comes first. Real politics takes over for religion. Religion is not aspect of Iran. Another thing, who is the best friend of Iran? You look at map of Iran, if I may. Look at all the neighbors. The closest friend they have is the only Christian neighbor they have, which is the Republic of Armenia. There goes your staunch Islamism. Armenia exists partially because of Iran's help, direct help. In the Armenian-Azerbaijani war, their number one supporter was Iran, number two was Russia. So much for Islamic ideology. Russia is one of their friends. When Russians were slaughtering Chechens, what did Iran do? How many protests did they have about it? They didn't say a word about it. Right in their neighborhood. Chechnya used to be part of Iran until Russia took it in Treaty of Gulistan in 1814. So, goes back to real politics, always takes over, which is, I think, this country is not crazy. This country is very calculated. We as Americans should know that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I didn't consult your former teacher, but I'd give you an A+ for that. Anyway, that brings us to the end of the first session. It was a wonderful talk. There were a lot more questions, but Amin will be with us for a good part of the weekend, so I'm sure he'll be happy to hear your questions one-on-one. We'll take a 15-minute break, and then we'll be back here at 10:30. Thank you.